Hi, I'm Arden. The night my landlord tossed my things into the snow, taped a note to my door that read, "Don't come back, you worthless trash." Something in me cracked. I'd stopped for a shivering old woman everyone ignored. Then the truth surfaced. She was a billionaire, and her secret was tied to me. What time is it where you are? Drop a comment, now. Walk up those stairs with me. The snow had turned into slush hours ago, clinging to my boots like guilt. I was 2 deliveries past my shift, hoping the last tip would buy me dinner, maybe even hot chocolate if luck was kind tonight. By the time I reached the old apartment building on the corner of Birch and Lowell, the wind was slicing through my jacket, whistling through every rip I hadn't patched yet. The hallway smelled like damp cardboard and paint that had peeled off decades ago. I pushed my bike against the railing and climbed the narrow stairs, humming just to hear something human in the silence. The lights above flickered, buzzing like tired flies. That's when I saw it. My boxes, my blankets, even the little photo frame of Mom, dumped in a sad heap by the trash bins. For a second, my brain refused to believe what my eyes were saying. I dropped the brown bag of groceries I'd just bought. An apple rolled away and hit the wall with a dull thud. Then I saw the paper. It flapped against my door, tape barely holding, the words scrawled in thick black marker, "Don't come back. You're worthless trash." The wind tugged at the paper, and I just stood there, my breath fogging up the air, my hands trembling around my keys. I knocked. Once, twice, harder. No answer. Then a voice came from the side, casual and cruel. "Told you not to bother, sweetheart. The lock's changed." Rex Malloy, the landlord. His belly filled his old plaid shirt, and his grin was the kind that always made me wish I'd been born invisible. "Rex," I said, my voice small, trying to hold steady. "There has to be a mistake. I paid last week. You said the receipt—" "You were 2 days late," he cut me off, leaning against the doorframe like it was a throne. "And you know how it is around here. First come, first served. Got a new tenant who actually pays on time." I felt the back of my throat tighten. 2 days because I stopped to help someone. An old woman was lost in the storm. I couldn't just leave her there. He laughed, a short, sharp sound that felt colder than the air outside. "That's your problem, Arden. You're too soft for this world. The rest of us? We mind our own business. That's why we don't end up sleeping on the streets." The words stung more than I'd admit. Not because they were cruel, because part of me feared they were true. I crouched down, gathering my things. My gloves were soaked, my fingers stiff. Every box I lifted felt heavier than the last. The apple I'd dropped earlier was now bruised, a pale smear on the dirty floor. Rex watched me for a moment, then shrugged. "You could try the shelter on Maple, but they fill up fast. Oh, and if you're thinking of breaking in, don't. I already called the cops earlier when I saw you hanging around." I swallowed, too tired to argue. "It's fine," I whispered. "It's all fine." He smirked, the kind of smirk people wear when they think they've won something. "That's the spirit." I stuffed what I could into my backpack, a few clothes, the photo of Mom, my old harmonica, and left the rest behind. The night hit me like a slap when I stepped outside. Snow was falling again, thicker now, dancing under the yellow streetlight like ashes. I pushed my bike down the icy steps, careful not to slip. The tires crunched against the snow as I pedaled away. Every breath burned. I didn't know where I was heading. Maybe the warehouse where old Mr. Johnson sometimes let me rest between shifts. Maybe nowhere at all. Behind me, the building faded into the blur of falling white. I kept my eyes ahead, refusing to look back. The note would still be there, flapping in the wind long after I was gone. And somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, I heard my mother's voice again, the one memory that always survived the noise of the world. "Kindness costs, but it never bankrupts you." I gripped the handlebars tighter, blinked the wetness from my lashes, and kept moving. The storm howled behind me, but ahead, a faint figure stood by the empty bus stop, trembling under the flickering light. The wind grew sharper as I pedaled closer to the bus stop. The snow was coming down hard now, slanting across the streetlights like white needles. My fingers were numb, my body stiff, but I couldn't take my eyes off that figure ahead, small, motionless, bent beneath a broken umbrella that did nothing against the storm. She looked so small, hunched over as if the weight of her years was pressing down on her shoulders. A sagging handbag hung from one wrist, the other clutched at the pole like she was trying to stay upright. No bus would come this late, not in weather like this. Still, she stood there, waiting, like someone who hadn't been told that hope doesn't keep buses running. I almost kept going. I really did. I told myself I'd done enough good for one night. I had no home to go back to, no warm bed, no meal waiting. My teeth were chattering, and my jacket wasn't thick enough to fight the wind. I had every reason to look away. But something in the way she trembled, quiet, desperate, and so human, made me stop. I braked hard, snow crunching beneath my tires. "Ma'am?" I called out. "Are you all right?" The woman turned slowly. Her face was pale and drawn, eyes wide and unfocused, like she wasn't really seeing me. Her lips were cracked, her breath visible in uneven puffs. I'm looking for Willow Lane," she murmured, her voice quivering like thin glass. "There used to be a blue house there. A little girl lived in it." For a moment, the sound of her words was drowned by the wind, but then it hit me. Willow Lane. The name struck somewhere deep inside, where memory and pain lived side by side. That was my old street, the one Mom and I lived on before everything fell apart, before she died, before the foster homes. My chest tightened. "Willow Lane?" I asked carefully. "That's miles away, ma'am. There's nothing out there now except old fields." She blinked, confused. "Oh, maybe it's gone." "So many things are gone." Her voice cracked at the end, and I suddenly couldn't bear to leave her there. "Here," I said, pulling my coat off before I could change my mind. "Put this on. You'll freeze out here." Her hands were trembling as I helped her into it. She smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth lifting just enough to make her look almost childlike. "I knew someone like you once," she whispered. "A little girl with a red kite. She always smiled, even when the sky cried." I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. "Let's get you out of this cold," I managed. She nodded, too weak to argue. I helped her onto the small cargo trailer hitched to my bike, the one I used for deliveries. I wrapped her in the thick blanket I kept for late-night runs. As I pedaled through the deepening snow, she began to hum softly. The tune drifted through the icy air, slow and trembling. "Amazing Grace." I froze for a second, the pedals stopping beneath my feet. My mother used to hum that same hymn while folding laundry when the radio was broken and the world still felt safe. Without thinking, I found myself joining in. Our voices, one broken and one weary, wove through the night. The roads narrowed as we moved further out. I didn't recognize this part of town anymore. Dark pine trees lined the drive, their branches heavy with snow. Then, out of nowhere, lights flickered on ahead. A tall iron gate stood before us, and beyond it, a house. No, an estate. Before I could even figure out what I was looking at, the gate swung open, and a man in a heavy coat rushed out. "Mrs. Evelyn!" he shouted, relief bursting in his voice. "Thank God, we've been searching for you all night." He hurried to her side, wrapping her in his scarf. I stood there, speechless, half frozen, half stunned. The woman looked up at him, still humming the last line of Amazing Grace, then turned to me with a faint, dreamy smile. "I told you she'd remember," she said softly, though I didn't understand who she meant. The man, her driver, maybe, looked at me, clearly trying to piece together what had happened. "You found her?" I nodded. "She was at the bus stop. She said she was looking for Willow Lane." His expression softened, then turned guarded. "She does that sometimes. Wanders off when the nurses aren't watching. He offered a stiff thank you, already ushering her toward the car idling nearby. I stepped back, suddenly aware of the mud and slush on my boots, the dirt on my jeans. In the glare of the estate lights, I looked exactly what I was, some delivery girl with nowhere to go. "It's fine," I said quickly, waving off his gratitude. "Just make sure she's warm." As they helped her into the car, I caught one last glimpse of her face. She looked peaceful now, eyes closed, lips still whispering that same hymn. I wanted to ask her more. Why Willow Lane? Why that song? But the moment was gone. When the car door shut, I turned back toward town. The wind had eased, but the cold had settled deeper. My coat was gone, my fingers aching. Still, I felt something strange, a quiet warmth I couldn't explain, as if that song had wrapped itself around me. By the time I reached my street, dawn had begun to break, and all I found waiting for me was a pile of wet boxes and that same word staring back at me. Trash. It wasn't the cold that made my hands shake that morning. It was the realization that I had nowhere left to go. The street was quiet except for the crunch of my boots in the snow. The air carried that sharp smell of wet cardboard and diesel, the scent of exhaustion and city edges. My boxes, what was left of them, were ruined, soggy from the storm. I stared at them for a long time before turning away. The sky was turning gray-blue when I reached the main road. There was only one place I could think of, the old delivery warehouse where I sometimes dropped off late-night runs. It wasn't home, but it had 4 walls and a heater that worked when it wanted to. The ride was slow, each push of the pedal like dragging myself through thick syrup. My hair was damp from melted snow, the hem of my jeans was stiff and frozen. By the time I reached the warehouse, my toes had gone completely numb. The neon sign buzzed faintly above the loading dock, Mendon Express. The O flickered, so it just read, Mend N Express. The parking lot was deserted. One old pickup truck sat half buried in snow. I knocked softly on the side door, my knuckles stinging from the cold. After a long pause, I heard shuffling inside, then the sound of a bolt sliding back. Mr. Johnson opened the door, his flannel shirt buttoned wrong and his gray beard dusted with sleep. He blinked, frowning when he saw me. "Arden, what on earth, kid? It's 4 a.m. His voice was gravel and warmth all at once. "I'm sorry," I said, hugging myself. "I didn't know where else to go." He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "You didn't have to stop for anyone tonight, did you?" I hesitated. The question hit too close. "There was a woman," I admitted. "Lost in the snow. I couldn't just leave her." Johnson let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "That kind of heart'll get you hurt, girl." He stepped aside. "Come on in before you turn into ice." Inside, the warehouse smelled of coffee grounds and old paper. The lights hummed overhead. I sat on a crate near the back while he filled a mug with something steaming from the pot. It was bitter and weak, but it thawed my fingers a little. "You can crash on the blankets by the sorting line," he said, pointing to a pile near the heater. "Ain't much, but it's dry." "Thank you," I murmured. He waved it off. "Don't thank me. Thank your stubborn heart. I told you, you're too good for this job. Too soft." I smiled faintly. "Soft doesn't mean stupid." He grinned at that. "Fair enough." When the warehouse went quiet again, I lay on the blankets, staring at the ceiling. The wind outside sounded like voices, fragments of the night I couldn't forget. The woman's whisper about Willow Lane, the hymn she hummed, the way she'd smiled when I covered her with my coat. Sleep wouldn't come. I turned on my side, tracing the cracks in the concrete with my eyes. Every so often I heard Johnson shuffle in his office, humming tunelessly to his radio. He was one of those men who carried a loneliness so old it had stopped hurting. By dawn, the light through the dusty windows painted everything silver. I sat up, wrapping the blanket tighter. My breath fogged the air. Johnson came out of his office holding a small transistor radio. Coffee's still warm, he said, setting it beside me. You heading anywhere? I shook my head. Nowhere that would take me. He nodded slowly. Then maybe stay till the storm clears. He paused, studying my face. But don't let kindness kill you, Arden. The world doesn't always pay you back. I met his eyes. If I had to choose again, I'd still stop. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then he just nodded, quietly. That's what makes you different. He turned up the radio to fill the silence. The morning news crackled through static. I wasn't really listening until I caught a name, Evelyn Hartwell, and my heart jolted. The announcer's voice grew clearer. Local billionaire and philanthropist Evelyn Hartwell was found early this morning after being reported missing during last night's snowstorm. Authorities say a Good Samaritan brought her safely home. The family has not released further details. My breath caught. The cup in my hands trembled slightly. Evelyn. The woman at the bus stop. I reached for the radio, turning the volume higher. A photo came to mind before I saw it. A face framed by silver hair, gentle eyes half hidden behind age. And then the broadcast shifted to a picture on the screen. Her estate, that grand mansion with the pine trees, and behind the gates, the porch, the same blue house, the same willow tree, the swing, the red kite that had once tangled in its branches. My stomach twisted. That wasn't just any house. It was the one from my childhood, the one I thought had burned with the past. I stared at the radio, my throat dry. Evelyn Hartwell. The name I'd never heard, but something in my memory whispered recognition. My mother's voice again, soft as a prayer. Kindness runs in the family, Arden. For the first time in years, I wondered what she had really meant. Johnson noticed the look on my face. You okay, kid? I nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure. Yeah, I whispered. Just remembering something. The radio kept talking, the announcer repeating the name, the details, the address. And as he did, something deep inside me began to stir, like a door I hadn't opened in a long, long time. As the news anchor said her name again, something deep inside me whispered, Go back. I didn't know what I was expecting when I pedaled back toward that mansion, only that some answers can't wait. The morning light was pale and thin, stretching weakly across the frozen ground. The storm had passed, but the world still looked wounded, trees heavy with snow, fences half buried, and air that stung the lungs when you breathed too deep. My legs ached with every push, but something inside me, something stubborn and unexplainable, kept me going. The black iron gates loomed ahead, standing against the whiteness like the edge of another world. The same guard from the night before was there, bundled in a heavy coat, steam curling from his coffee cup. His name tag caught the light. Riley. He saw me long before I stopped pedaling, and the look on his face said everything. Recognition, followed by irritation. Morning, I said quietly, climbing off my bike. My voice sounded too small in all that cold air. I just wanted to make sure Mrs. Hartwell's all right. Riley tilted his head, studying me like I was a smudge on glass. She's fine, he said flatly. You can go. I just wanted to... He cut me off, the corner of his mouth twitching into something close to a smirk. Look, lady, the family doesn't need charity visits. You did your good deed. Congratulations. Now move along. The words hit harder than I wanted them to. I tried to stay calm. I'm not here for money or thanks. She dropped this. I reached into my bag and pulled out a silk scarf, light cream with delicate blue stitching at the ends. I'd found it tangled in the spokes of my bike that morning. Riley crossed his arms. You expect me to believe that? It's hers, I insisted softly. She was wearing it when I found her. He scoffed, glancing toward the mansion as if hoping someone else would step in. People like you always come back for something. A reward, a headline, maybe even a handshake from the rich lady. Attention's a hard thing to give up, huh? My jaw tightened, but I kept my tone even. You don't know me. No, he said, smirking again. But I've met enough of your type to know how this story ends. Before I could answer, the low hum of an engine broke the air. A black SUV rolled up the long drive, its tires crunching through the snow. The passenger door opened, and a woman stepped out, a vision of polish and power. Her heels sank slightly into the slush, but she didn't seem to notice. Fur coat, diamond earrings, perfectly painted lips. She looked at me like one might look at a stain on white silk. What's going on here? Riley straightened. Mrs. Hartwell's daughter-in-law, ma'am. This woman claims she found your mother-in-law's scarf. The woman's expression hardened. Her scarf? She extended a manicured hand, and I gave it to her. She examined it briefly, then her eyes flicked back to me. And where exactly did you get this? I already told him, I said, my breath fogging between us. It fell when I helped Mrs. Hartwell last night. She gave a cold, incredulous laugh. Helped her? That's what you're calling it? Funny, because I just spoke with the police. They said someone matching your description was lingering near the property when she went missing. That's not true, I said quietly. I found her at the bus stop. She was freezing. I brought her home. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Home? Her tone dripped with disdain. You mean here? You honestly expect me to believe a stranger just wandered up and rescued my mother-in-law in the middle of nowhere? I don't need you to believe me, I said, keeping my voice steady. I just needed to make sure she was okay. Vanessa's lip curled. How noble. People like you always want something in return. She threw the scarf into the snow, where it landed in a wet heap. If you ever step foot on this property again, I'll call the police myself. For a moment, all I could hear was the quiet crackle of the wind. I could have argued, shouted, begged, but I didn't. I just stood there, feeling the cold seep through my shoes, the humiliation settling in my chest like frost. Then, out of nowhere, the mansion's front doors opened. A nurse in a white coat came running down the steps, calling out, Mrs. Hartwell's asking for someone. She keeps saying, the girl with the red kite. Do you know who that is? The world went still. Riley blinked. Vanessa froze. I didn't move. My throat felt too tight to speak. Vanessa turned sharply toward the nurse. She's confused, she snapped. Mother's memory comes and goes. Don't listen to her rambling. But the nurse hesitated, her voice lowering. She's been repeating it all morning. Says she remembers the girl's face. Vanessa's jaw clenched. She turned to me, her tone cutting through the air like a knife. You should leave. Now. I met her gaze, steady and calm. I already was. I turned, picking up my bike, the scarf still lying half-buried beside the gate. Riley shifted uncomfortably, watching me go. For a moment our eyes met through the iron bars. His expression softened. Just slightly, but enough for me to see that hint of doubt, maybe even guilt. The road stretched ahead, gray and endless. I didn't look back, though the cold seemed sharper now, heavier. My breath came out in clouds as I pushed forward. Behind me, the gate closed with a hollow clang, sealing the world of warmth and wealth away from me once again. As I reached the road, I heard the faint sound of Amazing Grace drifting from the mansion's window. Her voice, fragile yet certain. That night, I couldn't sleep. The song kept echoing in my mind like a heartbeat I'd forgotten was mine. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, Mrs. Hartwell, standing under that flickering streetlight, her frail hands clutching the broken umbrella, her eyes so full of something I couldn't name. The warehouse was quiet, except for the groan of the old heater and the soft tap of melting snow dripping from the roof. Mr. Johnson had already gone home, leaving me a thermos of soup and his usual warning, "Lock up and stay warm, kid." But warmth was the last thing I felt. The humiliation from that morning still clung to me like wet clothes. The guard's smirk, the woman's voice, sharp as glass, the word trash. It all repeated in my head until it stopped sounding like an insult and started feeling like a truth. I wrapped my blanket tighter, pulling it around my shoulders. That same blanket, the one I'd used to cover Mrs. Hartwell the night I found her. It still carried her scent, faintly floral, mixed with the crisp smell of snow. I'd planned to return it eventually, but now even that seemed impossible. As I folded the edges, something hard brushed against my fingers. A corner of fabric was thicker than the rest, the stitching uneven. Curious, I slipped a finger beneath the seam and felt paper. I hesitated. Then, with careful hands, I tugged it free. It was a small folded note, creased from time, written in shaky handwriting. I squinted at it under the dull yellow light. "If you find this, please know. You remind me of someone I lost long ago. The little girl with the red kite. Find the truth before they do." My chest tightened. The red kite. I sat there for a long minute, staring at the words as the heater hummed and the snow whispered against the window. Beneath the signature was just a single letter, E. I read it again and again, tracing the ink as if it could tell me something more. The handwriting trembled, like the hand that wrote it was fighting time itself. "You remind me of someone I lost long ago. When I was a child, before the orphanage, before the long string of houses and names, my mother used to tell me stories about a place she worked when I was small. A house with blue shutters and a porch swing, she'd say. The air always smelled like pine and cinnamon. Willow Lane." I pressed a hand to my mouth. Could that be it? My mother had worked for a wealthy family once. I remembered flashes, her apron, the smell of fresh bread, laughter from rooms I wasn't allowed in. Then one night, she was gone. No explanation, no goodbye. The neighbors said she'd run off. The social workers said she'd abandoned her post. But I never believed it. I looked back at the note, the edges trembling in my hand. Find the truth before they do. Who were they? The scarf, the house, the song, the red kite. None of it was random. It was a map, one written in memory and loss. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small box I kept with me everywhere. A cardboard thing, corners torn from years of moving. Inside was a photograph of my mother and me on a sunny day. I was holding a red kite, the string knotted around my wrist. Behind us, a blue house, the same one from the photo the news had shown that morning. The air in the warehouse suddenly felt thin. My heart thudded so loud I thought it might wake the whole building. My mother had worked for Evelyn Hartwell, and that red kite wasn't just a coincidence. It was mine. I sank down beside the heater, gripping the note like it was a lifeline. A dozen questions spun through my mind. Why did Mrs. Hartwell remember me? What had really happened to my mother? And why did she warn me to find the truth before they do? For the first time in years, I felt something stronger than fear, resolve. I couldn't ignore it anymore. When dawn began to creep through the warehouse windows, I folded the note carefully and tucked it into my coat pocket. The snow outside had softened into a quiet drizzle, and the world looked washed clean. Mr. Johnson arrived early, his boots tracking slush across the concrete. "You're up already?" he asked. "Couldn't sleep," I said. He nodded, studying me for a moment. "You got that look?" "What look?" "The one people get when they decide to do something they probably shouldn't, but they're gonna do it anyway." I smiled faintly. "Maybe." He sighed, pulling a set of keys from his pocket. "Whatever it is, be careful. The world's not kind to folks who ask too many questions." "I'll keep that in mind," I said, though we both knew I wouldn't. After he disappeared into the back, I grabbed my bike. My fingers brushed the pocket where the note rested, warm against my palm. I looked once toward the warehouse door, then at the horizon where the snow had stopped falling. The truth was waiting on Willow Lane, and this time I wasn't afraid to face it. The next morning, I packed the note in my pocket, pedaled back to Willow Lane, and promised myself, this time I wouldn't leave without answers. The mansion gates were open when I arrived, but what waited inside wasn't a welcome. It was a warning. The snow had turned to slush overnight, and the driveway glistened like a mirror. My tires crunched over it as I pedaled slowly toward the main entrance, my heart pounding harder with every turn of the wheel. The Hartwell mansion loomed in the gray morning light, its windows shuttered, its walls heavy with silence. Even the wind seemed to hush as I approached. Riley was at his post, though he looked different, tired, maybe even uneasy. When he saw me, he didn't bark or smirk the way he had before. He just frowned and stepped out from the gatehouse. "You again," he said, his tone low but not cruel. "I found her scarf," I answered, holding up the folded silk in a plastic bag. I didn't want to leave things unfinished. He stared at it for a moment, then at me. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "The family's gone for the weekend." "They won't like finding you on the property." "I just need 5 minutes," I said. "That's all." Something shifted behind his eyes, a trace of doubt, or maybe pity. After a pause, he exhaled and pushed the gate open wider. 5 minutes, he muttered, "and don't touch anything you shouldn't." Inside, the air was colder than outside. The hall smelled faintly of polish and old roses. A nurse moved across the landing upstairs, her shoes clicking softly against marble, while somewhere far back in the house, a clock chimed the half-hour. I walked carefully down the corridor, my fingers brushing the faded wallpaper. Everything here seemed suspended, like a photograph of a life that had once been vibrant but was now trapped behind glass. When I reached the parlor, I paused. A door stood slightly ajar down the side hallway, one I hadn't noticed before. Light spilled through the crack, golden and still. My curiosity tugged harder than caution. The brass plate beside the door read, "Portrait Room." I hesitated, then pushed it open. The room was vast and silent, lined with oil paintings that watched from every wall. Generations of Hartwells stared back at me. Men in tailored suits, women in pearls and lace, children clutching toys that looked too perfect to be played with. The air smelled faintly of varnish and dust. And then I saw it. At the far end of the room, half hidden behind a heavy curtain, hung a portrait unlike the others. A young woman with dark auburn hair stood in a garden, one hand resting on a red kite held by a little girl beside her. Both of them smiled softly, the kind of smile that carried warmth even through time. My throat went dry. I stepped closer, heart hammering in my ears. The brass plaque beneath the painting read, "Evelyn Hartwell and her daughter, Margaret, 1984. Margaret. My mother's name. The air left my lungs. My knees nearly buckled. The resemblance was unmistakable. Same eyes, same curve of the mouth, even the same small scar on her chin. I reached out, trembling, my fingertips brushing the frame. "My God," I whispered. It all fit now. The blue house, the red kite, the lullabies about angels in the snow. My mother hadn't just worked for the Hartwells. She'd been one. I didn't know how long I stood there, lost between disbelief and realization, before a sharp voice cut through the silence. "I knew you'd come back." I turned. Vanessa stood in the doorway, draped in her usual luxury, a silk scarf thrown over her shoulder like armor. 2 estate guards flanked her. Her expression was pure venom. "I should have known you wouldn't stay away," she said, her heels clicking across the marble floor. "What are you doing in here?" "I came to return something," I managed, holding out the scarf. "And to ask who she was." I pointed toward the painting. Vanessa's lips twisted. You have no right to be here. Who was she? I pressed. Tell me the truth. She was no one, she snapped. A disgrace. She ran away years ago and took something precious with her. And now you're here. Just like her. Sneaking in. Pretending to belong. Her words stung, but I didn't move. You're lying, I said softly. She's my mother. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Get her out, she told the guards. Riley appeared at the door then, his expression uneasy. Ma'am, maybe we should— I said out, she barked. I took a step back, refusing to let my voice shake. Mrs. Hartwell wrote me a note, I said, my hand instinctively brushing my coat pocket. She remembered me. She wanted me to find the truth. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. That old woman barely remembers her own name. If she left anything for you, it's nonsense. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. You mean this? She taunted, waving it. She's been scribbling like a child lately. I should have burned this already. Don't, I said quietly. Vanessa smiled coldly. Why not? It's meaningless. I met her gaze and said, Then why does she still hum Amazing Grace every morning? Her hand froze mid-air. The guards shifted uncertainly, glancing between us. The air in the room felt charged, like thunder waiting to strike. Vanessa's face drained of color for just a moment before she forced a laugh. You think you know her? You think a few coincidences make you family? I straightened, meeting her eyes. I don't think— I know. For the first time since that night in the snow, I felt no fear, no shame, only clarity. Get her out! Vanessa hissed again, but her voice had lost its edge. Riley stepped forward slowly, looking conflicted. As he escorted me toward the door, his hand brushed mine. Something cold and metallic slipped into my palm. When I looked down, I saw it, a small brass key, smooth and worn. He leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. You didn't hear it from me, he murmured. But that key opens Evelyn's study. He straightened before anyone could notice, and the guards led me out through the hall. The moment I stepped through the gate, the wind caught my hair, sharp and cold. The mansion behind me looked still, like it was holding its breath. I opened my hand. The brass key glinted faintly in the pale light, engraved with a single letter, E. As the gate closed behind me, I looked down at the brass key in my palm, engraved with a single letter, E. That night, I waited until the storm swallowed the roads again. Then I went back. Not to plead, but to uncover what they buried. The wind howled through the trees like something alive, bending branches until they scraped against the mansion's stone walls. The sky had turned an eerie shade of gray, thick with snow that fell in blinding sheets. I left my bike behind by the iron gate and walked the rest of the way, my boots crunching through the frozen drift. The brass key in my pocket felt heavier than gold. Riley had done what he promised. The back door near the servants' wing was unlocked, just enough for me to slip inside. The air hit me like a ghost. That same blend of lavender polish, dust, and age. Every sound echoed. The tick of the grandfather clock, the low groan of wood shifting under winter's weight. I moved slowly, careful not to wake anyone. Evelyn was somewhere upstairs, resting. The nurse's room light glowed faintly under a door at the far end of the hall, but otherwise, the house was asleep. I followed the faint glimmer from the study at the end of the corridor, the door with the letter E etched into the handle. My hand trembled as I slid the key in. It turned with a soft click. The study smelled of old paper and time. A single lamp burned on the desk, its glow catching on dust motes that drifted like tiny stars. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books whose spines had long faded. On the desk lay scattered papers, Handwritten letters, photographs, and an open jewelry box that gleamed softly under the light. I closed the door behind me and crossed the room. On top of the desk sat a silver locket. Inside, 2 pictures faced one another. My mother, smiling faintly, and a baby, me. The initials beneath were engraved in looping script, A.H. My breath caught. I pressed the locket against my palm, the metal cold and smooth. It was proof, not of wealth or status, but of existence, that I had been loved once, that I belonged to someone. A creak drew my eyes to the desk's side panel. A drawer had been left slightly ajar, its edge worn from age. I hesitated, then pulled it open. Inside was a single sealed envelope, yellowed around the edges, its flap still unbroken. For my granddaughter, if she ever finds me. My heart pounded so loud I could barely breathe. I tore it open carefully. Inside, the paper trembled in my hands as I read, "My dearest, if you're reading this, it means fate has done what I could not, brought you back to me. Many years ago, I made a terrible mistake. I turned my daughter away because she loved a man I thought beneath her. I said things I can never take back. She left with you in her arms, swearing I'd never see either of you again. I searched for her until the day my memory began to fade. They told me to forget, but I couldn't. Every child I saw, every song I heard, I saw you. The girl with the red kite. I stopped reading as my tears blurred the words. My mother hadn't been abandoned. She'd been cast out, and I, the child she carried into that storm of pride and pain, had inherited the silence that followed. I wiped my face and kept reading. If they ever find this letter, they'll try to destroy it. But you must know, you are my family, my blood, my last chance to make peace before I forget who I am. I only hope you forgive me for remembering too late." My hands shook as I folded the letter back into the envelope. A soft sound behind me made my skin prickle, the faint click of heels against the floor. "Well," a voice said coolly, "isn't this touching?" Vanessa. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, the storm's light flickering behind her like a halo of cold fire. "You just can't stay away, can you?" she said, stepping closer. "Sneaking into my mother-in-law's study now?" "How convenient." I held the envelope close to my chest. "This isn't yours," I said. "Oh, but it is," she replied smoothly. "Everything in this house is mine to protect, including that letter you're holding." She motioned toward it. "Hand it over before I call security." I didn't move. "You know what this says, don't you?" She smirked. "Please, that woman's mind is gone. She'll say anything to anyone who listens. You think that makes you a Hartwell? Don't make me laugh." Her words stung, but something inside me had changed. I wasn't the girl who ran before. I set my phone quietly on the desk, pressed the record button, and began reading aloud. "Many years ago, I made a terrible mistake. I turned my daughter away." Vanessa's face drained of color. "What are you doing?" "Making sure no one buries this again," I said softly. Her composure cracked. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she hissed. "You're forging that letter, trying to claim inheritance from a dying woman." I looked her in the eye. "No, I'm claiming my truth." For a moment, the only sound was the wind battering the windows. Then Vanessa lunged toward the desk, reaching for my phone. But I was faster. I slipped the letter into my coat pocket, the locket into the other, and stepped back. "If you destroy this," I said, "the world will see what kind of woman you really are." Vanessa froze, her hands trembling with fury. "Get out," she whispered. "Get out before I—" But I was already walking past her, calm and steady. "You tried to erase me," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "But blood remembers." Her eyes followed me, wide and frightened. For once, she didn't have a word to throw back. The hallway outside was colder now, filled with the roar of wind. I slipped through the same back door and stepped into the storm. Snow lashed against my face, but I didn't care. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from release. As I walked down the path, lightning flickered far away over the trees, turning the world white for a heartbeat. In that flash, I saw my reflection in the window, not a stranger anymore, but a woman who finally knew where she came from. By morning, the storm had ended, but war had begun. They called me a liar on the news. But the moment Evelyn woke up, everything changed. By morning, the snow outside had turned to water, the sky clearing after the long storm. But inside the Hartwell mansion, another kind of storm was brewing. Cameras flashed through the windows. Voices buzzed like angry bees. Vanessa had wasted no time turning the story her way. She faked documents, she told the reporters, her face perfectly composed for the cameras. She preyed on an elderly woman with dementia. We're pursuing legal action. Every headline read, "Delivery girl deceives Hartwell heiress." Every channel replayed clips of me being escorted out of the mansion the night before, framed like some con artist. Now I sat on the far end of the grand living room, the locket in my pocket, and the letter folded inside my coat. My hands rested in my lap. I didn't flinch at the camera flashes, didn't meet Vanessa's gaze. I just waited. Across the room, Evelyn's lawyer stood stiffly near the fireplace. Riley was beside him, his jaw tight. Vanessa paced, whispering to the nurse and her husband, Evelyn's son, who kept glancing nervously toward the staircase. "She's not coming down," Vanessa snapped. "She's too weak. Just read the statement and end this circus." But as if on cue, footsteps echoed from the landing above. The nurse appeared, gently guiding Evelyn down the stairs. The room fell silent. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, but her eyes, those sharp, ocean-gray eyes, were steady. She wore a shawl wrapped around her thin shoulders and held a cane that trembled only slightly in her hand. "Mother," Vanessa said quickly, moving toward her, her voice suddenly sweet. "You shouldn't be out of bed. Let's take you—" Evelyn raised a hand. "Stop!" Even her whisper carried weight. Everyone froze. Her nurse helped her to a chair in the center of the room. She sat there, taking in every face, the reporters, the guards, Vanessa, and then finally, me. Her lips trembled, but her gaze didn't waver. "My granddaughter," she said softly, "saved me. The little girl with the red kite. She came back." The room gasped. Cameras clicked like fireworks. Vanessa's composure cracked for the first time. "Mother, please," she stammered. "You don't know what you're saying. She's manipulating you." Evelyn's cane struck the floor with a sharp crack. "Enough!" Her voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the entire house. She turned to the lawyer beside her. "Bring me the letter." The man hesitated, then pulled a document from his briefcase. The same one I had hidden in my coat last night. My breath caught. "This letter," Evelyn said, holding it up with shaking hands, "was written years before my memory began to fail. It carries my seal and my signature. It declares Margaret's daughter, Arden Hartwell, as my rightful heir." The lawyer nodded solemnly. "Verified and notarized. It's authentic." A murmur ran through the reporters. Cameras zoomed in. Vanessa's husband took a step back, his face white. Vanessa tried to speak again, but the words tangled in her throat. "That's impossible! She forged—" Riley stepped forward, calm and deliberate. "No, she didn't." He took out his phone and played a video, the one from the night before. Vanessa's voice filled the room, icy and unmistakable. "You're forging that letter. Trying to claim inheritance from a dying woman." Then my voice followed, quiet but firm. "You tried to erase me, but blood remembers." Every person in the room turned toward Vanessa. The cameras flashed again, not for me, for her. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. Then she said, "There's something else they should know." Her nurse moved to steady her, but she lifted a hand to stop her. "All these years," she began, her voice trembling, "they told me my daughter died in an accident. They lied." The room went dead still. She looked toward her son, Vanessa's husband. He couldn't meet her eyes. "You told me Margaret was gone," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You let me believe it, because her death meant you inherited everything." Vanessa turned to him, stunned. "What is she talking about?" He said nothing, just stared at the floor. Evelyn's tears glistened in the morning light. "She didn't die. She left, because I drove her away. And when I tried to find her, I was told she'd perished. But she was alive, raising her daughter alone. You hid it from me." A sharp intake of breath went around the room. My own tears blurred the edges of the scene. For so many years, I had blamed my mother for abandoning me. Now I understood. She hadn't left me. She'd been taken from me. Evelyn reached out a trembling hand. "Forgive me, child. I lost your mother. I almost lost you too." I knelt beside her, taking her hand in both of mine. "You didn't lose me," I said quietly. "You found me. Just in time." She smiled faintly, brushing her thumb over my knuckles. "Your mother had her father's eyes," she murmured. "But your heart, that's mine." Around us, reporters lowered their cameras. Even Vanessa stood frozen, her face unreadable. A woman watching the empire she'd built on lies crumble in slow motion. Riley moved to the door, telling the crowd the conference was over. The lawyer began gathering papers. The nurse dabbed Evelyn's forehead gently. For the first time, the mansion didn't feel cold anymore. As the noise faded, Evelyn leaned close and whispered, "Don't let them tell your story for you again." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. That day, I didn't win riches or revenge. I won back my name. Weeks later, as spring melted the last of the snow, I stood once more at the bus stop where it all began. The air carried that soft scent of wet earth and lilacs, the kind that makes you pause for no reason other than to breathe. Children were chasing one another across the street, their laughter bouncing off the brick walls of the bakery. Puddles glimmered under the sunlight, and for a moment, the whole town felt reborn. It had been months since that morning inside the Hartwell mansion. The chaos, the cameras, the truth that broke everything open. Life had quieted since then. I'd moved into a modest apartment downtown, above a flower shop that opened its doors early and filled the halls with the smell of fresh tulips. My days were different now. I spent them working for the foundation Evelyn created in my mother's name, the Margaret Hartwell Foundation. Our mission was simple but powerful, to help families find one another again. We funded search programs for the elderly, offered legal aid for abandoned seniors, and partnered with shelters to reconnect lost relatives. Evelyn insisted on naming me director, though I tried to refuse at first. "I'm not qualified," I told her. She just smiled, eyes full of that knowing light. Compassion is qualification enough. Every week I visited her. Her health was fragile. The years and guilt had taken their toll, but her spirit glowed brighter than I'd ever seen. She'd taken up painting again. Her easel sat by the window overlooking the garden garden where snow once piled against the glass. The last painting she worked on was of my mother, standing beside a child holding a red kite. She said she wanted to finish it before summer, but the brush would often slip from her hand halfway through, and she'd just laugh softly. "You have your mother's hands," she told me one afternoon, her voice thin but warm. Steady, kind. "She would have been proud of you." I swallowed hard and smiled. "She'd be proud of you too." She reached for my wrist and pressed something into my palm, her old paintbrush, the handle worn smooth. "Keep this," she said. "When I can't paint anymore, you'll hold the memory for me." Those words stayed with me long after she fell asleep that evening, her breathing shallow but peaceful. Now, standing at that same bus stop, I felt everything circle back. Across the street, I saw a young man pause to help an elderly woman step over a puddle. She clung to his arm, grateful, smiling. He said something that made her laugh. The scene made my chest tighten. I slipped a hand into my coat pocket and pulled out the red scarf, the one I'd wrapped around Evelyn that night in the snow. It was washed now, soft again, and faintly perfumed with lavender. I pressed it to my face and closed my eyes. "Kindness is the only inheritance worth keeping," I whispered. The wind lifted a strand of my hair and carried it across my cheek, just like that night. I thought about the note they'd left me once. "Don't come back, you worthless trash." I remembered how it burned, how it made me question my worth. Now I knew it was never about me. It was about their blindness, their inability to see value beyond money or pride. Evelyn had seen it in the end. She'd turned her fortune into something that healed instead of hurt. Even as her body weakened, she found ways to make amends. Weeks later, I got the call. It was just after dawn. Her nurse's voice trembled on the other end of the line. She passed in her sleep, peacefully. She was smiling. I sat there for a long time, phone still in hand, staring out the window as the sun crept over the horizon. It was raining lightly, and the drops tapped against the glass like a soft farewell. When I visited the mansion that final time, the garden was in bloom. Inside her studio, the painting stood unfinished, my mother's face complete, but the child's hand only sketched in outline. Beside the easel was a note in her handwriting, "Home." I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I hung the painting above my desk at the foundation office, right next to the red scarf. Every morning since, I've started my day looking at them both, her unfinished love and my reminder to continue it. One afternoon, as I locked up the office, I spotted Riley waiting outside by the bus stop, holding 2 cups of coffee. He smiled that quiet smile of his, the kind that said everything without words. "You always know when to show up," I said. "Just following the weather," he joked. "Seems like spring suits you." We sat on the bench, sipping coffee as the sky turned pale gold. I told him about the foundation's latest success, reuniting a mother and son after 30 years apart. He listened, nodding, eyes soft. "You think Evelyn would have been proud?" I asked. He smiled. "I know she is." For a while, we just sat there, watching the light move across the street, the laughter of children, the rhythm of life carrying on. "The snow will fall again someday. And when it does, I'll remember her hand in mine, and how saving one lost soul saved my own."